It feels incredible.
Fish on First Live. We are back on our usual off-season schedule here on Wednesdays nights throughout the entire year, and there's not really much downtime in this particular Marlins offseason, as we knew coming into it due to the front office shakeup. Last week we were talking about who could be filling in that vacant spot, and now we have our answer. As always, the show presented by La Pop in Doral. Check them out on social media and go to their location for all your chiropractic and wellness needs. Eli Sussman here. I got Kevin Barral by my side and two first-time guests joining us. Gabe Garcia, Lemon City Sports Live, Alex Murphy from Raise the Roof podcast. We wanted to get a Tampa Bay Rays perspective on the big news, of course. I want to start with you, Gabe, the hiring of Bendix. They did a good job keeping this under wraps. We did not hear much about any of those specific candidates that were involved in the process. And as we're gonna hear from Bendix himself later in the show, I have some clips to play. It was kept pretty quiet, and according to him, he interviewed in person last weekend. This is Wednesday. Just last weekend, he did the interview, gets offered the job the very next day. Kind of caught everybody by surprise. But what was your just first reaction to what we've been able to gather so far about what Bendix brings to the table compared to his predecessor, Kim Ng?
All right. So when I saw the interview on Hot Stove, I think he described it best. It was like a whirlwind. He went from doing the interview to being told that he got the job, and next thing you know, he's on a flight to Arizona for the general manager's meeting, I think, or whatnot in Arizona. And my big reaction is that this is a fantastic hire, and the reason why I think it's a fantastic hire is because I like what he said about people and culture resonated with me a lot. And the way that he pretty much said that baseball operations is like one giant machine of everybody that's trying to make the team, win games, win a championship, find success. And he brings the type of success that we've been looking for, because that team, that Rays team, they've been in the playoffs often, at least recently, in a division of big money teams. And that's like music to our ears, because we're never going to be like big spenders. And the quote that really grabbed me was when he said, making $1 play like $5. And that really resonated with me. Also, how he had praise with our coach, Schumacher, saying that he's a guy that inspires players, that gives them the flexibility, that empowers them, which is another word that he listed a lot. And man, at the end of the day, I'm really excited at the brain power that we've obtained. And another thing that I liked about him was that they're not afraid to try new things. He's going to give people the flexibility to try stuff. Basically, it's like saying, don't be afraid to, do something unorthodox or something that's considered nuance or whatnot. And with all that said, I think one of the first things he should do is a contract renewal with Schumacher, because the way that he spoke about him and the way that they seem to jive, at least from the interview, I think that's probably going to be one of the first things he'll do, because he's still learning the organization in and out. So it's going to be a while before he makes like a big move, but he might as well go with something that he's familiar with, which I imagine would be the coach himself.
Yeah. Quickly to you, Kevin, just your same general impressions before we get to Alex.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, and you mentioned this on the Lockdown podcast, it didn't feel so thorough as we would have assumed it was going to be. You look at the last time, obviously, when they hired Kim, this was handpicked by Jeter, very quick, not really a thorough process, as Bruce mentioned in his statement when Kim left, but still a great hire nonetheless. I mean, you got a guy from the organization that Bruce has been trying to model his organization around since he arrived in Miami. This is a guy who currently, ending 2023, the Tampa Bay Rays payroll was $79 million, according to Fangraphs. So it's a great hire for Miami, and for myself, and I know Alex Carver, our forum director, would kind of have the same thoughts. It's great now that we finally have someone who wants to who knows very well about player development, knows how to bring these guys from the bottom up. And I don't know if this clip is on there, but he was mentioning on the hot stove how, kind of like Skip has mentioned throughout the whole season, that next man up mentality, having that guy that right behind you has developed well in your organization, is big league ready. Like AAA, you look at the Durham Bulls, the AAA affiliate for Tampa. That was one of the better affiliates, in minor league baseball. And overall, you look up from top to bottom, those are very good affiliates and very good players on every level. I'm very excited to see what he could do with this farm system. Obviously, we'll get his thoughts on Monday with whoever's going for us. I believe it's Isaac and Noah for that. So we'll see what happens there. But great hire for Miami. They get the number 2 in Tampa, and I'm very excited. He's still very young as well. So this is, I believe one of the younger guys. Is he the youngest Pobo in Major League Baseball right now?
Well, I was joking with Peter Pratt that he's younger than Peter is. 38 years old. One of the younger guys out there, younger than some of the players that were on the Marlins last year. Like Yuli Gurriel, I think about the same age as Johnny Cueto, or a few months apart. So as you touched on, though, and I want to bring this to Alex, is he was the number 2 in Tampa Bay, even though he had the same title that Kim Ng had in Marlins. He was underneath Eric Neander as their president. Can you just give us some understanding? How much did you actually hear about or hear from Peter the last couple of years when he has the GM title? Or is Eric Neander, was he still the guy that most people were focused on and pointing towards when it came to taking accountability for moves and the direction of the organization?
Yeah, I first want to say thanks so much for having me on. Also, Kevin, to go off of your point about the Durham Bulls, I've done this research on my own. I'm pretty sure they are the most successful minor league team ever. And even if you want to trace it back to since they've been with the Rays, I'm pretty sure that still holds. Sco Bulls always. So going into the stuff about Peter, I would say, as you mentioned, since he's been with the Rays and since he's been elevated up to this GM position, it really has been, he's been a number 2 behind Neander. I think most people, when it comes to Rays fans, we really focus on what Neander says more than what Bendix says. And that's nothing against, Peter specifically, but it's more of just like, that's what we've known since Eric has taken over that spot. And he was GM before Bendix came in and then got promoted up. And then kind of Bendix came under him. So I know that they've definitely worked together, but it definitely is more, I think, from a Rays fan standpoint, we tend to focus more on what Neander says, because it seems like he has the most kind of say when it comes to those sort of decisions that would make more sense for what Bendix does. Now, that's not going against what he is. He's a really, really great baseball mind, really, really smart guy. He's been with the Rays organization since 2009. So that's 15 years that he's been with the Rays, or was with the Rays before. Obviously, now he's moved to Miami. But, great baseball mind. I think the Marlins got a really, really good hire there. I know that the Rays have it's been a thing over recent years where, guys will get promoted up internally through the system. That's how Neander got to his position. Pretty sure that's how Friedman got to his position before he went to the Dodgers. Same thing with James Click and Chaim Bloom, and now Bendix is part of that. So, definitely a really, really smart guy. I just think that maybe from the Rays fans' perspective, not losing Neander is more of the biggest thing here, because he's definitely still going to be the guy who's going to be pulling the strings come the future, whoever they end up hiring as their new GM.
Right. The way that it works, the Marlins, it's kind of a wordplay that'll put them in this position, meaning that they didn't have a Pobo the last few years. Kim Ng had that top job. And the reason why they're able to interview GMs like Peter Bendix is because technically this is a promotion to move up the chain. And someone like Eric Neander already being a Pobo, he's somebody that wouldn't even really be accessible to them during this search process. One thing that I was kind of skeptical of, and we'll never probably get full confirmation, but it felt like people that were previously Pobos around baseball, I don't know if they'd really be interested in the Marlins job if they've done it before, just because of the state that this organization is in, the very strange circumstances by which they divorced themselves from Kim Ng, despite the success that she had. And it felt like Peter Bendix among the realistically available candidates. Like he checks about as many of the boxes as you can want. The Marlins organization, and Bruce Sherman in particular, he has not been shy with expressing his admiration for the Rays. He wants to be the Rays, and that is, that is a very tricky proposition, because I think a lot of small market organizations say the same thing, but emulating something that another organization is doing is sometimes easier. If your sense of identity is just trying to copy what another team is doing, then you're probably not going to be successful. And there has to be like that line between taking their best practices, but also embracing who you are. I'm sure you've noticed that in commentary around baseball, right? That the Rays are just doing this very particular thing where they're consistently good, and yet they're consistently cheap in terms of major league payroll. And they consistently find unheralded players and simply make them better. But when you look around the league, doesn't it feel like they're still kind of unique, that no other organization has really captured what it is that the Rays do when it comes to being so sustainably good, despite being relatively inexpensive at the big league level?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I want to make sure I bring Aiden into this. Aiden's also part of our Raise the Roof team, so I want to make sure that you can chime in on this as well. But, I mentioned Chaim Bloom previously. He's someone who is kind of a direct example of that, because he basically tried to implement what he did with the Rays to the Red Sox. And as we all saw with that, none of that worked out. So that's the reason why he's no longer the GM of the team. So, I think in the sense of what the Rays are doing, and I think it does make sense to hire someone like Bendix, who came from what was going on with the Rays, and kind of translates that to what happens in Miami, knowing that Miami also kind of deals with the same things. They have a good farm system, they have a low payroll, things like that. Those sort of things. I think it makes sense for him to kind of transition to a team like that. But yeah, I honestly, it doesn't make any sense to me sometimes when I think about the Rays, just how successful they've been and how continuously successful they've been. I don't know what specific thing has been the reason for that success, just because there's so many factors that contribute to it. But yeah, I don't know. It's really, really interesting to see how other teams try to implement it. And I mean, we've seen the Dodgers do it to an extent, but they try to do it in a way where Friedman knows that he can implement the same sort of ideas as what he did with the Rays, but he also has like $200 million more to be able to do those sort of things. Right. So he can still go after the guys with untapped potential, but then he can go out and sign a major guy and not really have to worry about it, because he has those sort of expenses and he has that capital to be able to use. Aiden, I want to make sure that, you get your thoughts in about Bendix and what has allowed the Rays to be so successful as they've been.
Yeah, sorry for the background noise, guys, on campus here at one of the local colleges in the Tampa Bay area. But honestly, what it comes down to and the success of it, I think a lot of it has to do with especially international and amateur scouting. Talking with a lot of people inside the organization, what it comes down to is how good the Rays scouts are and how valued their scouts are. If you look at the Rays scouting team itself, most of them have been with the team for at least 5 to 10 years, and a good portion of them have been with them since their inception. So a lot of it comes down to knowing the Rays way. I know you hear it on a lot of podcasts or radio stations or broadcasts, doing things the Rays way. But it comes down to that international amateur scouting and also professional scouting at a level too. The Rays find these talents that you look at them. Take, for example, even this season, a guy like Robert Stevenson from the Pirates. He was had an over 5 ERA in Pittsburgh, then comes here to Tampa and now is going to get probably a multi-year deal somewhere this offseason as a free agent. You look at things like that and you see those things, and that's why the Rays are so successful. Now, what I think Bendix needs to do, especially in a place like Miami, you already have a great core of guys there. You've got guys like Jesus Sanchez and obviously Jazz Chisholm and guys like that. But what he needs to do is really develop that scouting department. I think we've seen in a while, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, because you guys have a better intake on it, but their minor league level hasn't been that same level that the Rays minor league level is at. No one's minor league level is really that high. But the Rays are constantly in the top 10. And you look at the Marlins, I mean, for many years, they were in the bottom third of the league in what their minor league talent was. And I know, I especially have a really close connection with the Rays minor league system, but I have seen day in and day out what their minor league production does, because you see a guy like who was just hired today and Michael Johns, who was hired as the Rays first base coach. He started at rookie ball with the Rays and has moved up within the organization. was at AAA Durham, was a minor league field coordinator, was with High A Port Charlotte back when Port Charlotte was still a team. So they take these guys who grow this talent that the scouts find and grow them within, which the Marlins haven't really done well in the past few years outside of a few guys.
Yeah. Let me play this clip from him on his interview last night, Marlins Hot Stove Show, where he touched on the importance of people. And that seems very generic, but I think this will hit home for people in the Marlins who have had so much turnover basically every single year at important positions, whereas the Rays, as you guys have covered, they have a lot more continuity. And it seems like people actually want to be there, want to stay there and get rewarded when they do a good job in that organization. So this is from Peter Bendix last night.
It really starts with the people. It starts with everybody in the organization pulling in the same direction. It starts with setting clear expectations and clear guidelines for what we're trying to achieve, and then empowering really good people at all levels to go achieve those goals. And so, a baseball operations department is an enormous machine, an enormous thing that is ultimately comprised of people with different backgrounds all trying to build a winning team. And so if you get the right people in the right spots, you empower them to do their jobs, you give them freedom, flexibility to try something new that might not always work, but to know that trying new things is part of our identity. It's part of what we need to do in order to stay ahead of the pack. And so it really starts and ends with people.
Finish this.
Yeah. So that gives you a taste of it. And one thing that we're wondering from the Marlins perspective is, how many people is he going to retain from the previous front office, and who is he going to hire as well? From your guys' perspective, are you worried about him trying to lure other members of the Rays front office over here? I'm sure you've been through that before, of course, with other guys, whether it's Chaim Bloom or whether other Andrew Friedman back in the days, other executives when those guys leave, are they successful and able to bring some of their deputies over with them? Or is it a case where you generally see those guys show loyalty to the Rays and stick around even once the leader moves somewhere else?
I think it happens more with when we've seen managerial changes. Those guys have moved to different places. I wouldn't say it happens really as much with guys up in the front office and guys that are, executives with the team in those higher positions. Because when I'm thinking through things right now with Bloom and Click and Friedman, I can't really think of any other like big name Rays personnel that went with them. It's kind of just like they did their own thing, and then other guys have come through the system and have been able to replace them. It seems pretty successfully during that time. But yeah, I wouldn't say. Personally, I wouldn't be that freaked out as just as a Rays fan overall, because I don't know how many people he would lure, because it just seems like he's just kind of that next domino in line of former Rays personnel who now have gotten the chance to move on to a different organization and kind of do their own thing. And again, with that, at least from what I've seen, there really hasn't been that sort of like, oh, he's leaving, that means that we need to leave with him. Because I think that there is really a lot of internal faith within the organization, especially with a guy like Eric Neander, who's still there, someone who's definitely well-respected within, the baseball community. And I know someone who a lot of Rays fans like, and a lot of Rays fans have seen his development over time and the moves that he's made. So, things like that, I think, are more, lean themselves more to just people staying within the organization. But you never know. Some guy might go to another organization that's within the Rays, within the Rays front office or executive office, whatever it might be. But I just don't see anyone specifically going with Bendix. I just see it more of being whenever that next guy is ready to move on to a new organization, probably won't be the Marlins. It'll just be some other random team in baseball. Then they'll be ready. But I don't think that's going to happen as of right now, because I don't know if the Rays are going to look to actually fill that GM spot, if they're going to fill internally. Personally, I want Kim Ng to come to the Rays because I saw what she did in Miami, and I think that she's absolutely fantastic at her job. Now, I don't know. I understand the reasonings for why she ended up leaving Miami, and I don't know if she would be okay with literally just a lateral move to go to the Rays. I think some of the things that would make the job a little bit more enticing for her to want to come to the team is just the success that they've had, the consistent success that they've had. But also that consistent success has come with not spending money. And I know that she wants to go to a place where she has the ability to spend more money on to get guys in free agency, whatever it might be. So, we'll see what happens with that sort of GM move. But yeah, I think in terms of guys moving with Bendix, I don't really think that that's going to happen.
I think, I've texted a few people inside the organization internally, and, I'm sure there will be some lower level guys maybe that get a promotion and get a chance to go with Bendix, but no one really of note or a big name. The biggest thing that I could see different is potentially Bendix trying to, for lack of a better term, poach some of the Rays minor league coaching staff and scouting staff and give them promotions. Reynaldo Ruiz is a great name who's been around the Rays, who's low A, sort of in the rookie ball levels as well, but is a great baseball mind regarded. But just some names like that, some of the lower level minor league guys who he might give a chance to at a higher level because he knows the caliber of winning they bring to the Rays organization to potentially, start to right the ship of the Marlins minor league. I could see more of that, but I think Alex hit it right on the head. I don't think we're going to see any big names move, but you could see some, some smaller minor league coaches, maybe some scouting staff or some baseball ops staff who get promotions by joining the Marlins.
No, that's a great point. It has been a talking point for us the last several years about the Marlins' total inability to develop hitters, guys simply getting worse when they come into the organization, or ones who stagnates year after year. And I imagine coaching is a big part of it. They recently let go of their drafting amateur scouting director, and they're trying to place some of the blame on him for making some of the picks, but it's been a combination of both, no doubt, both the drafting and the development to this point. And so, yeah, it was going to be fascinating to see who he fills for the executive positions as well as all the way down to coaching. And he said himself, I'll play one more clip from him, that there's no imminent plan for him to hire a GM underneath him as well.
Question is, do you plan on hiring a general manager? Where does that stand right now?
I don't have an exact answer for you. This is day 2 of the job, and the first thing that I'm doing is just understanding the people who are here, understanding what roles are open, understanding what skills we need to bring in, and don't want to force anything, and certainly don't want to make any rash decisions. And so I don't really want to put a timetable on that or any other role. I have to learn as much as I can about the organization as quickly as I can.
So that was him again on Tuesday. We'll have a better idea of him after his press conference on Monday. Both him and Bruce Sherman are going to be there, and we'll be there to cover it as well. These teams have been pretty frequent trade partners in recent history between one another. Both a couple of these right before Bendix was GM, and then those last 3, or at least the last 2, coming right after he was elevated to that level. And overall, that first one from 2019, that one was a spicy one at the time with Nick Anderson.
I don't want to talk about that.
And Trevor Richards for Jesus Sanchez and Ryan Stanek. And then, the other ones, as it has panned out, haven't always been big movers or shakers. I love the Joey Wendell trade at the time from the Marlins perspective. And he was good the first month of 2022. And then from there on, his bat dried up, his injuries piled up as well. From the outside, we always... non-Rays people, we think of the Rays as always like winning just a vast majority of these trades and always like pulling better than expected players out of kind of obscure guys that are at the fringes of the roster or overlooked prospects. But yeah, in this case, none that the Marlins severely regret for the past few years between these teams. Although, it's that most recent one that I'm going to have my eyes on long term with Marcus Johnson and Santiago Suarez. I thought kind of highly of those guys, but they were just so far away from the big leagues. And from what I saw from the outside, both of those guys had pretty solid seasons in the Rays system, right?
Yeah, and what's really funny, and I love to go back to that Jesus Sanchez trade because I have a personal connection with that trade. In 2019, he was at High A Bowling Green at the time, actually, and he was actually down in Port Charlotte rehabbing a slight injury he had at the time. I was working with the Stone Crabs at the time, and actually I was in the trainer's room with him when he got told that he was getting traded over to Miami. So that it's a funny personal connection. But I think all these trades overall, while none of them are, oh, wow, this is such a big trade, I think all of them show that the Marlins were starting to try and go towards the Rays way in terms of development. They found these guys and pitchers who, were a little bit more veteran, especially you look at a lot of these trades. A lot of these players are a little more veteran who had something left in the tank. And honestly, I think the Marlins got a good amount out of them. And, we're starting to see, I think, within the next 2 years or so, we're really going to see. I really like Xavier Edwards. I'm very high on him and have been since the Rays got him. But I think we're going to start to really see the emergence of him. And I really think that he's going to turn out to be a very good level player. I think of him very similar to a former Marlin and Miguel Rojas, where he is just going to be able to play any offensive position and really play it well, or defensive position, I should say, and really play it well. And I think at the end of the day, what we see with all these trades is that the Marlins were already moving towards the Rays way of trying to find guys they can get value from. And I think that Bendix is just going to improve that. And we're going to see a lot more, I call them Rays-style trades, where, they're going to give up a minor leaguer or cash or international money for an aging reliever or a veteran position player who then turns into the next coming of Christ with the Marlins or the next coming of Christ with the Rays.
I do want to mention I have severe PTSD from that 2019 trade because of one name. I'm sure you guys can guess the name that's on there. I take that as a loss for the Rays only because Nick decided to not say that he was injured the entire 2020 postseason, even though he was completely overused by the coaching staff, and then proceeded to, I guess, have Cash's trust enough to come in after Snell. I hate that move. So I've always said this. I've never been angry about the move to take the guy out. I was always angry about the move to put the guy in. Because the guy they put in, I'm pretty sure still has a postseason record of most consecutive games with at least one run given up.
And I can confirm that based on the DMs in our Raise the Roof group chat that Alex was like, I'm not upset that they're pulling Snell. At the time, he said, I'm not upset they're pulling Snell. But why multiple expletives are they putting in Anderson?
Yeah, he was really – oh, my God. I have so much pain. But, I mean, even so –
for the most part, Nick Anderson was a really good reliever for you.
Yeah, he was really good. And then the Rays overused him, and then he became atrocious. So, and the thing that sucks the worst about it is had he just said one thing, he wouldn't have basically missed the last 3 years of baseball. I think he's thrown maybe 20 or 30 innings max over the last 3 years, that's even worse throughout the entire thing is that he's just stayed injury prone the entire time. But even that trade, if you look at it, Anderson, they got really, really good use out of him for one season, and that season they happened to get to the World Series. So that definitely worked out to get there. Obviously, the end result wasn't what the Rays wanted. Trevor Richards, I can't really say the same because he was just kind of serviceable, and then he was very expendable. And then once he was traded to the Blue Jays, he became somewhat decent against the Rays, which I think pissed off a lot of Rays fans. But if you look at all of those, especially that one, Stanek was pretty serviceable for the Marlins, and Sanchez is still someone who's, getting there in terms of development as a player. But I definitely agree with Aiden's sentiment that, they're going to be making a lot more of those small trades that people won't think of immediately. But down the road, if those guys develop and turn into really good players, that, those trades will be looked upon more highly than the rest.
I think we're going to see a lot of I think the best trade that I can point at for the Rays that I'm going to see a lot from the Marlins is that one with the Brewers where the Rays got Rasmussen. That one is sticking in my mind specifically of a trade that the Marlins are going to make. And I think with Bendix as well, what the Marlins can do is really take the time to, yes, your major league team is decent. And yes, you can make a push for a wild card. But I really think what he's going to focus on in his tenure early is trading away guys when their value is the highest, that I feel like the Marlins have always traded them just a little bit too late.
Yeah, the Marlins definitely, I think, have struggled with that. And I know, Eli, you would say this as well. They tried to sucked out value out of players, and they really tried to use these guys. And obviously, Isan Diaz had zero value by the end.
Right. Yeah. On the other side, they have leaned so far in this other direction where when guys are bad, they stick with them super long in hopes that they turn the corner, in addition to having that problem with selling too late on the guys that actually have high value. And
are we talking about a specific right fielder?
Yeah, it has been, and it's going to be different. You imagine moving forward, but it's going to be. Those decisions, even as prudent as they prove to be long term, so they are pretty unpopular. From the outside, the Rays do some things that sometimes that really shock people, and sometimes are they are just kind of the way that they make these like really disciplined decisions. That's a word that Bendix brought up during his interview, is being disciplined and making these decisions that are efficient and that you have a good degree of confidence are going to pay off long term, no matter what the optics, no matter what the emotional swing is at the moment. That would be a big difference from what the Marlins have done. The Marlins generally they have avoided it. When they have those tough decisions, they do kick them down the road, and you'd have to say that it has more often than not come back to bite them because of that. Now, there's just one more thing I wanted to do before getting our Raise the Roof guys out here. They've been great with us so far. On every show, almost every show, we do a flipped fish, where we look at a former Marlins player that also played for another particular team, some connection between the Marlins and another team. In the spirit of Peter Bendix coming over from the Rays to the Marlins, we're going to do a Marlins and Rays edition of it. So I give you guys a few hints as to who this player is. It is somebody, former Marlin in Ray, who was traded from between these teams. So he was traded between the Marlins and the Rays during his career. A right-handed pitcher, tall right-handed pitcher. He's about 40 years old now, but he debuted in 2008. He retired after the 2015 season, so about 8 seasons in the big leagues. You could see predominantly a reliever in there. People in the comments, we invite you to chime in live. Played for both of these teams during his career.
I had a name in my head, and then he said predominantly a reliever, and that threw me off a little bit.
Yeah,
I still have a name, but I don't think the name is right because I think that he was too early.
Think on it a little more. We're going to go to commercial break. When we come back, we'll do the grand reveal, and we'll get you guys out of here. So stick with us as we find out who this flip fish player is. We are back. The rest of our show, the Flip Fish reveal here. Former Marlins and Rays player who's traded between these teams during his career. He spent more of his career with the Marlins than the Rays. None of our live chatters got it right. It's not Sergio Romo. And it's not Mark Hendrickson, although I guess that was the closest guess in here. But it was the Hopper, Burke Badenhop.
Wouldn't have had that one.
I was thinking Kyle Farnsworth, and I knew that was 100% wrong.
For some reason, I was thinking JP Howell because I thought he went to the Marlins before the Dodgers.
Nah.
But then that was off.
That's a really deep cut.
Yeah. There weren't actually as many I chose this very particular niche where there's a trade directly between them to send the player from one of the teams to the other. So yeah, I had a small group of players to choose with. Usually it's not quite that hard. I think our guy that comes up with this segment, Isaac Azud, he's not here on this one. I think he would have gotten him because he has a bit of a thing for Badenhop. So with that, yeah, aside from him, though, I can understand how that slipped past everybody.
This is a very good.
I was Hail Marrying with Steve Cishek, but I was like, no, that can't.
Oh yeah, that was a little too late, I think.
Right.
I was like, it can't be him.
The only other name I had in my head, and I don't know if he ever played for the Marlins, was Randy Choate.
He did play for the Marlins,
he did. It wasn't traded between them, but that's a good call right there. He was with the Marlins in 2012 during that miserable season.
And I knew he was on that 2008 World Series team, and I knew he retired around that 15 mark, so that was the only other name I had in my head.
Not bad.
Yeah, all right. So Alex and Aiden from Raise the Roof, check out their podcast. Find them on social media as well. This was really terrific insight from you guys on this. Yeah, good luck moving forward. Without Bendix, I'm sure you'll be fine. The Marlins need the good luck more than the Rays do, but it was still good to get your insight on that. And yeah, Aiden, enjoy the rest of your game out there, whatever it is that you're tuning into.
It's watching my fraternity play flag football. It's so much fun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, guys. And we'll finish the show with some Marlins stuff. So yeah, go find Raise the Roof over there with the relationships between these teams and the history of dealing with one another. I'm sure they'll come up again. And yeah, we'll talk to our guys in the future about those intersections between them.
Season preview. I mean, series previews. We'll have those.
Yeah. No, we coordinated that kind of at the last minute between those guys. And I thought they brought really good insight. I'm sure we'll bring them on again when the Citrus series comes around. So what I wanted to get to during the second half of the show is some just free agent talk. There was Jorge Soler has been in the news. He's been the first real rumor that we've had involving the Marlins and a free agent. Not really a surprising one, all things considered, given that how well he performed for the Marlins this past year. Let me see if I can find it from Francis Romero about the Marlins being one of about 6 teams that have contacted Soler to this point and remain interested in a multi-year deal. What's just your thoughts about that, Kevin? The idea that they would even consider bringing him back, that they're in the mix to bring him back, despite the fact that it's probably going to be really expensive and some of the risks that Soler carries at this stage of his career.
I really do wonder, just in general, how much a team is willing to give Soler. Not even that, just how many years you are willing to give a guy who DH'd over 100 games and played less than 40 games in the outfield. Now, given the fact he didn't play very well in the outfield for the most part, and he's dealt with back issues, obliques. I mean, he's dealt with a lot of injuries, and that's why I was still very shocked that Miami didn't offer him the qualifier. And I know, Eli, you and I are on different ends of the spectrum, different ends when it comes to where we are with the qualifier and if he would have accepted it or not. But 1 year, $20 million to prove yourself like that you can indeed stay healthy for another full-length season for the most part. He played 130 something games. That it would have been ideal. And worst comes to worst, he leaves Miami. He's still got a draft pick where that's where, once again, the Tampa Bay Rays, Peter Bendix, that is where he thrives in the draft and scouting and all of that stuff. So yeah, I am intrigued to see how much Soler we'll get. Mitch Haniger, I think we were talking about him as a kind of an example to look at. Not a very good season entering free agency, but still enough to earn himself a 3-year deal over $30 million. So maybe that's what you're looking at with Soler. Or if a team wants to play it safe, you kind of give him the deal that Kim gave him, which was 3 for 36 with opt-outs, and obviously he was able to use those, and we'll see what happens there. But man, I mean, we saw what Soler could do, and that leadoff spot, the second spot in the lineup. It would be very nice to have his type of have him back and be the team's primary DH. Obviously, you still have Brian De La Cruz, Jazz, and Jesus Sanchez there. Jesus Sanchez, who could play the outfield. We'll see what they do with Avi Garcia there, and should be interesting to see how much Miami does want to give him. Obviously, for him, it would make a lot of sense to stay in Miami, given the fact he's from there, he's close to home, he already has a house there, his family's there. So I also found it hard that he would leave Miami, but we'll see what happens. I think everyone here would agree it would be great to have Soler back, despite the injury concerns and just the durability that he has right now.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Gabe? How far would you go to keep Soler around?
I've been torn about this question for quite a while, actually, because on the one hand, if I'm not mistaken, the qualifying offer was $20 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So you get him for a year, and it's $20 million that you could have spent somewhere else, maybe grabbing another person at that position from the free agency, or addressing another need. But at the same time, the fear is that, let's say we give him a multi-year deal, what's to say he won't turn into another Avi Garcia? Because I was looking at the contracts, and man, when I looked at Avi's numbers, it just made me cry. And I'm on the side of giving him a qualifying offer. Yes, it's $20 million, money that could have been spent elsewhere, but it's 1 year. If he proves himself, great. And if you don't have him for long-term planning, you could have traded him at the trade deadline. Since it's like one of the things that the Marlins need to learn is finding that right sweet spot of, trading a player right at the top value and get the most out of it rather than, just bleeding them dry, so to speak. So I honestly think they should have probably given him the qualifying offer, $8 to $20 million. And if he grows, if he plays well, great. Potentially trade him, to get a higher value, to get some sort of a return. And if he doesn't, well, you only had him for a year. You're not trapped with him for a while like we are with a certain other player that I will not name. And yeah, I've been torn on it, but I think they should have given him the offer. The worst thing could have happened was he says no, and we get a draft pick compensation.
Yeah. And again, you look at it and you kind of do wonder what level of interest he has to stay in Miami, because as mentioned, this guy decided to come here. He wanted to play in Miami. Obviously, this is where he lives during the offseason. This is where his family is, his son. Everyone's here in Miami. And again, for example, you end up going to Toronto, which I believe was one of the teams, I guess, that I saw on Twitter. I don't know if that was true or not, but Toronto's a team that would love to have Soler. Milwaukee is a team that makes a lot of sense for someone like Soler. So we'll see, but I find it very weird. Not weird. I find it hard that he would want to leave Miami. Maybe Miami convinces him enough that he could take a smaller, less money to stay here with maybe 2 years to stay back in Miami. But we'll see. Again, it would be huge to have him back, and we'll see what happens on that end.
I am of the opinion that it was extremely likely that he would decline the offer. I felt there just wasn't much risk there, because in this free agent class, we're going to go through it right after this. We're just going to look at some of the names out there. There's just are not many other hitters that are close to his level that could even potentially be true everyday hitters the way that he was last year. And because of that, there are going to be some very competitive offers out there. So while it is interesting that they're kind of in the mix to bring him back, I have my doubts. I think we've seen this movie before where Marlins do have legit interest in a player, but they kind of know in the bottom of their hearts that one of the other teams in a larger market is going to make an irresponsible decision. It happens with Starling Marte a couple of years ago, where they wanted Marte back. They didn't want to, they were motivated, but there's also, like, within reason, there are other teams out there that are irrational. And especially now under Bendix, I think it's going to continue the same, where they're going to draw a line at a certain point and not be irrational, even if they just really want to keep a guy. So with Soler, I'm predicting he's going to get a pretty meaty 3-year deal out there. And a point that was brought up a lot in comments on Twitter, everywhere else, is that, the difference between this multi-year offer and the qualifying offer is it's going to be a little less than $20 million annually. Whatever contract he gets, I don't think he's going to reach quite as much. He'll have to accept less in that first year in 2024 than he would otherwise. But to me, like, this is a guy this might be his last big shot to get a multi-year deal of any kind. When you're a DH, the line between being an all-star and being out of the league is pretty thin. If you struggle with injuries or some inconsistency, if you just have one down year, then it's really hard to find a landing spot for you in the big league. So as high as things seem right now, if he has a 2022 season in 2024 where his numbers are mediocre, where he finishes the year sidelined with a back injury or something other significant, then his market is just a fraction of what it used to be. So as tantalizing as that offer might be for a 1-year salary, I think he was pretty clear entering this offseason that he's going to look for the biggest total number, guaranteed dollars, over a bunch of years. So we'll find out whether I might not be right about that. Maybe I can't read his mind the way that I think I could. But if I was advising him, I think I would just go for the biggest total number. And therefore, if I was the Marlins, I would have put in that qualifying offer to get something in return, because I think they're going to have a hard time keeping up with these other bidders.
It's also worth noting that at his age, he's 31. He obviously, you want to get that final contract, as you mentioned, Eli, but he probably wants to win. He wants to win, and obviously, he's 31. He already has 2 World Series, one with the Braves, one with the Cubs in 2016. But man, just keep adding on to that, you want to be around a winning team, and obviously made the playoffs this past season with Miami. And he's a great playoff performer. He obviously wants to go back there. So you want to get as much money as you can, but you also want to find yourself in a position where you are on a winning team. And the one thing that's also worth, I guess, mentioning here is that Tampa, for the most part, these past couple of years, they've been in the rumors for some big name free agents. I know they were in the mix for DeGrom. They were in the mix for Freddie Freeman that one year. It's like Tampa when they want to spend big money, they will. And I don't know how much of that is part of Peter Bendix, how much he wants to implement, I guess, making that big money move, and if he would do it with someone like Soler. But man, if you want to bring a guy who's familiar with this team, this coaching staff back, Soler obviously makes a lot of sense to do that. And it's a huge power bat, which you're adding back along with Berger and Bell.
Yeah, it's all about that sustainability, like how Bendix was saying. He wants to build like an organization that's sustainable for scouting, for all levels, and it's that question that would Soler fit in those plans? Would he be sustainable? Because like you guys have mentioned, he's 31, right? Personally, that's not old, like in sports anymore. Like I used to be of that opinion, like, way back when a player is 30, he's already old, he's an old man or whatever. But we're seeing guys still produce at 33, 34 and stuff like that. I mean,
Albert Pujols until his last year.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a random guy. For example, JD Martinez, he's like 36, and he was productive enough, at least at the time, for the Dodgers to give a guy that age that's considered ancient, what was it, like $10 million? Yeah. So you never know. For all we know, maybe the Marlins have a change of heart and they sign or maybe it's like some big strategy to keep Soler here for like 3-4 seasons. Because like I said, 31's not old, but at the same time, does Soler, like, he would have to weigh how much he loves being here versus how much he wants to ride off in the sunset with maybe one more championship ring.
And really the big question here is how much money the Marlins have to spend overall, what their overall budget is, because that's ultimately what determines what they can do in terms of roster building. Even if they like Soler, like there's only yet to reserve a certain amount of money to address other needs on your roster. So there's only so much of this you can put into a DH when you've already put a lot into first base for this year, when you are stuck with putting a lot into one of your corner outfield spots and Avi Garcia. It adds up, and there's only so much to go around. At least that's the way that the Marlins have operated historically. So I just want to jog through some of the position groups available in free agency. Realistically, this offseason is going to be split, we think, between free agency and trades. And if not, it might even skew more towards trades just because of the fact that this free agent class is not a good class. The way that it has lined up, the players available on the open market this year are, for the most part, just not as good as the ones that we're used to seeing in free agency in a given year. I start with catchers. That's an area where we know the Marlins have to do something. Last year, they rode all the way through with Fortes and Stallings. Stallings was just as bad as the year before. With Fortes, fine defensively, a big step back offensively. And we think that Stallings is almost certainly going to be non-tendered next week and enter free agency himself. So these are some of the guys out there. Jorge Alfaro just joined that group. He was in the Marlins organization until last week in AAA.
I love that you put him first on the list, just saying.
It's alphabetical. It's just an alphabetical order from MLB Trade Rumors. Pretty indispensable research from A to Z. We have there really not a single guy that sticks out in terms of a regular starting catcher that you unconditionally trust. But Kevin, you'd have to say that Mitch Garver, considering the year that he had, including the postseason with the Rangers, like, he is understandably somebody that I'm sure the Marlins will show some interest in.
Likely the best catcher on the market, Mitch Garver. And obviously in Texas they have Jonah Heim. So I'm just a little concerned with the defense of Garver, but obviously the bat is what stands out, and he had a great season for Texas for the most part, and he looked great during the World Series. you keep looking at that list. Yasmani Grandal, for the most part, had a pretty good year. I know he was a Marlins target. Aside from that, the list is pretty bad. No offense to these guys, all over the age of 30 already. Gary Sanchez had a very nice year for the Padres after bouncing around the league a little bit. And not really anyone else that stands out. Victor Caratini, I know, was a name, pretty good player before heading to Milwaukee. I know Eric Haas was a name we'd mentioned before. Really not. I believe he got DFA towards the end of the season. There's not this market is not very good. I think, as Eli mentioned, especially with the catcher situation, I want to know what teams are looking to deal their catching depth or a player, there. But if you look at Miami, you have Will Banfield in the minor leagues. So you have Paul McIntosh. Those two guys, I would say are better than a couple of these guys, or could be better. Let's put it at that way. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Obviously, Stallings is not the guy moving forward, especially with Sandy out for the season. No real need to have him there anyways. And, I would like to see what they do. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring back Alfaro on a minor league deal just to stay in AAA like last season. That's really about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past them. When I look at that list outside of Garver and Alfaro as a flyer, so to speak, man, I'm almost tempted to say we're better off to trade for a catcher.
Yep.
Or look in-house, because, man, every time I look at that list, outside of Garver and Alfaro, I think we either go after Garver or trade for a catcher, a consistent catcher that at the very least puts up good synergy with a pitcher, which I honestly think is really important. It's one of those intangibles that there's not really a stat line for. And also defense, most importantly, defense. Those pass balls, man, that could cost you a game.
Yeah. And speaking of the trade market, just yesterday, the Rays, part of their 40-man roster crunch, somebody claimed Christian Benford off of waivers or in a small trade. There are a lot of possibilities to acquire backup types in that situation. I'll just say that I'm not totally opposed to Gary Sanchez. He's never going to get on base. He's going to swing and miss quite a bit. The year that he had was kind of encouraging. It wasn't totally out of line with his career norms. He's somebody that at least is going to have power. And his defense has gotten a really bad rap over the year. I think he's been kind of unfairly penalized, bullied because of some of his obvious mistakes. When you look at the overall picture, not a terrible defensive catcher. So that's a guy that I wouldn't be totally opposed to, as long as it's just a one-year deal for him. That's a big question. In this thin market, there are mediocre players or risky players that could get a lot more money than you think.
Nobody there should get more than a one-year deal. Anybody that we grab there should be no more than a one-year deal. It's just too risky, too shallow at that position.
Yeah, my bad. I think if you're looking at the trade market, definitely it's going to be hard because most teams already have their catchers set for the season or moving on to next season. Dodgers are a team to look at. They have Will Smith on their team, or I believe they have him there, and it's definitely got to look. Just not him specifically. I'm talking more about their farm system. They have a lot of guys there. Obviously, their number one prospect is a catching prospect, Dalton. I hope I'm saying this right. Rushing. He's there. You have Diego Cartay, who struggled a little bit, so I wonder how willing they are to trade him. They have a lot of guys in that system, and they have a lot of catching in that system, which stands out specifically. I know I mentioned Ivan Herrera as a guy who I would like them to bring in. They have Wilson Contreras for a couple of years left. I know, Eli, you traded for Herrera in your off-season article. So he makes a lot of sense, a guy who I've been talking about since the deadline. So just a couple names to look at there. I mean, this is a really bad market, I guess is the best way to put it. And
what LMF is referring to is in the aftermath of Craig Counsell making that flip from the Brewers to the Cubs, William Contreras put out a really vague tweet that seemed to react and show that
he's not going anywhere, folks.
Not happy about it. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think he's going to be requesting a trade. I don't think he's going to be able to force his way out quite like this. And this is a name from the past, Joey Bart. I remember in 2021 that he was somebody the Marlins had eyes on. They're like, he's blocked behind Buster Posey. The Giants might be expendable there. And then even when Posey retired, Bart has not taken advantage at all of the openings they've had the last couple of years. That'd be another guy to really buy low on. But you really wouldn't be able to have much expectations of him. He's a backup at best. It seems maybe he proves to be a lot more than that and has a late breakout, but for the moment, that'd be a buy low and not a guy you go into next year relying on. On this shortstops list, we'll do shortstop and then I'll look at starting pitchers before I get out of here. There is a typo here because on this MLB trade rumors list, they put Javier Baez there with like an asterisk in case he opted out of his contract for the Tigers. He obviously did not do that. He's not a free agent. Even if he was, the Marlins would not be all that interested in him considering how much he's disappointed. Yeah, the flashy name that is actually on there is Tim Anderson, who was linked to the Marlins through a lot of last year as a pretty obvious guy that you could acquire without giving up too much. That seemed to be a little bit down from his all-star peak, but it could be a bounce back candidate. And then the year went on, and he never hit a home run, and he also didn't get very many hits altogether, and he also didn't play good defense. And overall, he was a sub-replacement level player, just a miserable year for him that led to him, even though the White Sox had an option on him for next year, they cut him rather than picking up that option. So he's on the market, as was the case with that other discussion. There just are not surefire everyday guys in here. You have ones who used to be interesting, like Anderson, like Brandon Crawford a few years ago, like Joey Wendell a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. So he's still available. Ahmed Rosario is the one that I think you can squint and see an everyday player in there, a solid everyday player. He was in 2022, just a well-rounded shortstop for the Guardians, double-digit homers, efficient base stealing. His defense rated as above average that year. And even though he's not a disciplined hitter, he does have a relatively recent track record. And as you can see, he's about as young as any of the major league free agents that are out there. But do you have any interest in Rosario, Kevin? Any belief in him as being like just a stopgap guy that you pull in case they can't pull off like a sexy trade?
Yeah, I guess that would be the most ideal option, out of this market. Obviously, I think we've made it very clear that Tim Anderson shouldn't be a Marlin. I know the name sounds flashy, and maybe for marketing, it's pretty cool. I don't know if he'll get knocked out here in Miami, but aside from that, I mean, yeah, just not the right guy to bring in. He's not very good defensively at shortstop. He had a 60 WRC plus this season, only one home run. He didn't struck out too much, to be honest, but he just wouldn't get on base, didn't slug, didn't hit. He was really bad. There's no other way to put it. Ahmed Rosario, after going to the Dodgers, he was actually all right. Didn't play much shortstop, I believe. I think he played more second base. And then obviously they had Miguel Rojas there still, but yeah, honestly, just look through the trade market. I think that's another position there. And I don't know if they want to try Xavier Edwards at shortstop again during spring training. That was
an interesting comment from Aiden about his. He seemed to suggest.
I know, right?
I
was like, wait, what?
Could handle multiple positions like that. He was pretty high on Edwards. Watching him, he didn't get very many reps at shortstop in the minors last year. The ones he did get, I didn't like. I didn't think that it looked good, mainly because of his arm holding him back. So that is the thing with Edwards, which is frustrating because he is a good fundamental player. He's obviously a good bat to ball guy. He runs really well. The problem is, like, it seems to me that he's a big minus defensively unless you put him at second base. It would solve a lot of their issues if Edwards could kind of fill in occasionally at shortstop. I don't see it. That's a big holdup there. And that is, as Mega lays out, that is the fallback plan, I guess. And that is something maybe a player could get better at over time with their defense. I would hope that is what he's focusing on this offseason with him, because that would definitely unlock a lot of extra playing time for him.
I think, Jacob Amaya is also in that minor league system. He made it up to the big leagues, spent, I believe, just a couple weeks, or a couple days, honestly, with the big league roster, and was sent down and struggled after that. We'll see. I think one of the big headlines, and obviously it's still a little early to mention it, but one of the bigger headlines entering, one smaller, I could say, but for the Marlins, for us, it's a little bigger. Who's going to be that starting shortstop if they aren't to sign one? If they weren't to sign a shortstop, will they give Xavier Edwards a couple reps there, see how he goes, about it? And will Jacob Amaya kind of find a good offensive rhythm at the big league level or against these spring training I guess, games, because definitely Miami has a couple players that they could put there. And you would obviously, and I think we could all agree here, we would like to see Xavier Edwards in the lineup. He was really good offensively at AAA Jacksonville. He had a really nice, he was pretty good for the Marlins at the big league level for, in the playing time that he did receive. You would like to see those two guys succeed. And, it feels kind of like the Rays way. And obviously we're not going to dive too deep into that, but definitely two guys that, and Bendix does have familiarity with Edwards. They were the same organization just a couple years back. So we'll see what Bendix, thinks about putting him there at shortstop. We'll see what happens there, and we'll see. But definitely don't expect them to go after any big names, and not that there are any there. And I would be floored if they end up signing Tim Anderson.
I don't see them signing Anderson. I see them more going after Rosario, or if not, just go with a committee of sorts with Edwards getting reps, like you said. I honestly think it's time to give the kid a look, starting with spring training, and then from there, just slowly edge him in, because I think we can get real numbers out of him, in my opinion, over a lot of these guys. So we might as well, if we can't get someone like Rosario or another player via trades or whatnot, I'd say do it by committee and give Edwards reps. Give him playing time. He really needs it.
Yeah, let's get out of here on this with the starting pitchers that are available. There's a lot of them on the market as usual. This is the strength of this free agent class of starters out there. I used little emojis, the money emojis, for guys that I felt were just too expensive for the Marlins to even consider. So that includes Sonny Gray, Jordan Montgomery, Aaron Nola, Ohtani, unfortunately, even Yariel Rodriguez. That one is, maybe he falls into their range, but definitely Blake Snell. Stroman, I think on a per year basis, it's going to be too much. And then Yamamoto, by some people's estimations, he could be the most expensive guy in this whole class in terms of years and total dollars. I think you want to be paying attention to just about everybody else as a possibility here, aside from those guys. Yeah, we'll finish up on this, Gabe. Like, how much of a priority is starting pitching to you, knowing that Sandy is going to be out for the year? That a lot of young guys held up surprisingly well last season between Luzardo and Braxton and Yuri. A couple maybe coming back from injuries that we didn't see last year, like Trevor and Max. Do you think it is how high of a priority is it, though, for them to add a veteran of some kind from this big list?
To be really honest, I don't think it should be that high of a priority. I honestly think that they should be focusing on bats, especially the way that we were. I mean, granted, we took on really good pitchers from the Phillies, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we were outscored, if I'm not mistaken, 11-2. And there were moments that our star slugger, Arise, was the only bit of offense that we were getting sometimes. So honestly, I'm not too worried about the pitching. Bendix kind of shared that similar sentiment, considering what we've got, the players that are coming back. And then, our farm system has always been well known for arms and not necessarily bats. I'm more concerned about the hitting by far. Honestly, they should probably pour as much as they can into the hitting and into a viable catcher, because the catcher is going to be really important. Really important. Like I said, for the catcher, it's all about defense and synergy with your pitcher. If he gets on base, hits 240, 250, 260, or even 270, more power to him. But yeah, honestly, I would lean more towards the hitting. I don't see pitching as a concern right now, even without Sandy.
Is there anybody in particular, Kevin, that excites you among the ones that are kind of realistically affordable?
Yeah, that Johnny Cueto guy. I'm joking.
I was about to say, man. For that one, you just go after Ohtani.
This is a fun class. As you mentioned, Eli, a lot of guys who, unfortunately, the Marlins can't afford, but there's a lot of guys that are actually pretty good. I like where the pitching's at this current moment, despite Sandy being out. You have Yuri, you have Luzardo, Rogers, hopefully coming back from his injury. You have Ryan Weathers, who I'm actually very excited to, watch during spring training when that time comes. But Seth Lugo is definitely the name that stands out of the guys Miami can't afford. He had a very nice season with the Padres. You have Mike Clevenger, who I know had his little off-the-field issue, but he pitched for the White Sox. For the most part, he was pretty good. I mentioned Jacob Junis. I know that's not a starting option, but definitely a guy who could eat innings if necessary. He's a better Brian Hoeing. You could mention Corey Kluber's found a way to be pretty durable, I guess, throughout for a couple seasons now. Had a nice season with Tampa, the Yankees. I believe he was with the Red Sox most recently. So that's another name I wouldn't mind throwing some money at. Not a lot of it, but just a simple deal. So yeah, it's a fun market. Michael Walker is also out there, who had a great year for the Padres. And I know you also didn't put the money sign, so I'll throw their names out there. And I know Morosi mentioned him. He had mentioned Eduardo Rodriguez as an option for Miami.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. I probably should have put a money one on.
I know. I was like, Isaac joined. And then you have Martin Perez, the other one. So those are two names I would like to come to Miami, Venezuelan players. So yeah, we'll see. Maybe Arias could cook up some nice recruiting out there and bring these guys over. But a lot of nice options despite Miami's lack of being able to spend.
Yeah, two names I'm going to mention before closing out the show that I think would be available on one-year deals. I'm not totally sure. As mentioned in my offseason blueprint, Jack Flaherty is a few years removed from being a stud for the Cardinals. Had some injuries since then. Last year, had little flashes of looking like his old self between the Cardinals and Orioles, but overall was kind of shaky. He is one of the younger guys in this market. He does have a pretty deep pitch mix. One thing that he can improve a lot on is his changeup, and what better place to refine your changeup than coming to the Marlins. I think he could be had on a one-year deal and try to reestablish himself as a good, legit, like number 3, if not a number 2 pitcher. I think he has a lot of upside still, even though he's been shaky recently. I think the thing around the Cardinals this past year was kind of a big weight on everybody's shoulders, and that he'll do better with the change of scenery. The other one, Eric Fedde, a Marlins killer while he was with the Nationals. He was a terrible overall pitcher for 5-6 years in Washington, but when he faced the Marlins, he was incredible. I think even when those splits started to like normalize later on, he still has a sub-3 ERA and a dozen starts against the Marlins. A lot of those, of course, at Lone Depot Park. This past year, pitched in KBO in South Korea, and he was the best pitcher in that entire league. Yeah. So there is some history of guys going over there and then coming back and being a better version of themselves. But given the fact that he struggled quite a bit throughout his major league career when he wasn't facing the Marlins, I think he'd be available on a one-year deal or 1 year plus a club option. I think like Johnny Cueto money last year, like 1 year, $8.5 million with a club option, something like that. I think his upside is a lot better than Cueto's was this past year. So a very big list, but I am of the opinion that find somebody that's available on a 1 year deal, and guys that are available to, you could trade them in the middle of the year if things go really badly, but they need some veteran presence of some kind right now to really make that a strength of the team again.
Lucas Giolito was the guy who... Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh,
dollar signs are the really expensive guys, right?
Yes.
Oh, you got me excited about Clayton Kershaw all of a sudden.
Yeah, well, Kershaw, for people that missed it, he underwent shoulder surgery that he's going to miss a good chunk of next season.
So we could get him at a discount.
Right. You don't know what you're getting, but you do. Yeah, it wouldn't be much.
Lewis would be very happy. We could say that. But Lucas Giolito, a guy who Miami had interest in when the waiver wire thing happened, he's just still 29. He had a very bad second half of the year. He struggled for the most part with the Guardians and the Angels, and I don't know how much he would actually get at the market right now. And then the last name right above him, Kyle Gibson, gives you a good amount of innings. He was actually pretty good for Baltimore. So I'll leave it at that. We're like 9 minutes over already.
Yeah, this was a very busy stream right here. 3 first-time guests for people that missed it. We had Aiden and Alex from Raise the Roof podcast. They gave us some good insight about Peter Bendix. You can rewatch that first half of the show if you missed it. We'd Gabe along with us the entire time, his first time on the show, even though he's covered this team really well for Lemon City Live. So you can check out his stuff there, not only on the Marlins, but other college baseball as well that you do for them.
I cover Marlins baseball. I also do Canes baseball and Canes football. And I talked about this with Kevin, but I was a little, forgive me. You know how we don't develop good hitters like for the Marlins? Kevin, you're going to hate me for this, but I was low-key hoping we did not draft Yo-Yo, because had we taken Yohandy Morales, I would have been very concerned about his development. you know, we are capable of putting out good bats and everything, but since we're more known for our arms, oh man, you know, I wanted Yohandy in a Marlins uniform, but at the same time, I was fearing for his development, and I'm like, no, please
if
don't
Alderman
come
wasn't there, they were gonna draft him. So.
No, they were gonna grab him, but then you know they decided to get like the best high school pitchers they could see. But man, low key, I was nervous for Yo-Yo. I really was.
He was already in high A, or he finished the year there. So yeah, good for him.
Yeah. So you know, thanks for having me here. It was a lot of fun. Hopefully I come back for more, especially as the off season goes on and we get more hot stove conversations and when the season finally begins, which I'm really excited for. But yeah, man, it was fun. Nice to see everybody again. It's been a while. But yeah, man, thanks for having me here.
Gabriel Garcia, Kevin Barral, Eli Sussman here on Fish on First Live. Yeah, we'll be back with more coverage, new stuff to talk about as this offseason really heats up. Thanks as always for your support right here. Guys, consider becoming a super subscriber. Fishonfirst.com has those details there to support us all year round and all the ambitious coverage that we try to do for you guys. But yeah, so it's going to stay busy with this Marlins offseason under new leadership. The Peter Bendix episode. Hope you guys learned a little bit about it and enjoyed the content that we went through. So thanks a lot for your support. As always, go Fish.